Oftentimes in the agriculture space, we forget to talk to those that we're working with the most, farmers. This session, Farmers' Voices Shaping Private Sector Support, will look specifically at programs that have been designed with the farmer's voice, needs, and choices in mind. Stay tuned.
Welcome, everyone. So happy that you could join us at this session at the ICT4Agriculture Conference. And we're going to have a great panel discussion today about the impacts of COVID and specifically how some really great research that's being done at 60 Decibels has been used in the field for different organizations working to respond to this crisis with smallholder farmers, and really kind of exploring how technology has helped organizations pivot and be responsive to farmers' needs and be agile in the face of this type of research, and also looking at what we can expect moving forward. So first, let me go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Lisa Schrader, and I manage the Mercy Corps AgriFin programs based out of our hub office in Kenya. So we cover about 5 countries across Africa, supporting over 130 partners as they build and test and scale digitally enabled services for smallholder farmers. So across all of our partnerships now, our partners are reaching about 14 million farmers with solutions that we've helped them to build. And one thing that we've definitely seen over this period of both COVID-19 and also the desert locust crisis that's hitting Africa is that digital solutions can be extremely agile and scalable. And we're very happy to have this group of panelists here today to talk about how that's been happening in the COVID context and how we can take that forward. So let me go ahead and just quickly introduce our speakers. So first we have Venu Argawal from 60 Decibels, and she's going to be presenting a lot of the research that they've been running in Kenya. It's been a great time series set of research that the Mercy Corps AgriFin programs have been watching as a bellwether and really helping to guide our own strategy and how we work with partners. And then we also have a speaker from Agro Wallet. So we have Simon Daho, who's the managing director at Agro Wallet and really leads an innovative digital financial service solution for smallholder farmers here in Africa. And Patricia Gichinga, who's the head of production at the Mediae company. And the Mediae company, probably many of you know for their Shamba Shape Up programs, for their iShamba program. They have television programming, radio programming, digital programming all over Africa, centered here in Kenya. And they've been a huge part of the response to, to COVID-19 and to desert locust. So looking forward to hearing more from all of our panelists, but let me go ahead and introduce Venu, who's going to be kicking us off with a presentation.
So let me begin with describing a little bit what we're doing, and then I'll take you through our findings. Our research is funded by FCDO's Strengthening Impact Investing Markets in Agriculture and aims to collect actionable evidence on how Kenyan farmers are faring in the face of the pandemic, the challenges they're experiencing, and the kind of support that they would find useful. Our hope is that development practitioners, especially social businesses, impact investors, and funders, can use this information to better tailor their COVID-19 support to farmers. We've now been collecting information from 500 farmers every month since June through phone-based surveys in Kenya. That is a total of 2,066 farmer surveys in all. And respondents are selected randomly from a panel of those who own less than 3 acres of land. And a few other characteristics worth noting before I go into top insights are 49% of the people we've spoken with live on less than $3.2 per person per day. 50% of them are women. Over 60% planted less than 1.2 acres of land. And we have a good mix of farmers who sold crop and livestock produce. So 81% sold crop produce in the last year, and 45% sold livestock produce in the last year. As I mentioned, we've now been collecting data for 4 months and have spoken to over 2,000 farmers. So today I would like to focus on trends we are noticing in this data and highlight calls to action from farmers' perspective. Here's our summary. Cash is king, now more than ever. That, combined with access to affordable inputs and markets, will help farmers secure returns from the upcoming season and hopefully start on their path to recovery from the pandemic. And digital approaches, despite their high potential, at least in our sample, remain surprisingly underutilized. Let me now take you through the data behind each of these insights. The main one that stood out to us was financial effects of the pandemic are becoming more severe as time passes. So in the chart on the left, the pink line shows the percentage of farmers who said that their financial situation is much worse because of the pandemic. And you see that this has increased from 34% in June to 54% in September. In June, only 4 in 10 farmers were using 2 coping strategies, and that number has now increased to 7 in 10 farmers in September. And on the right, what you see is the mix of coping strategies that farmers are using. The green line shows you that more farmers are digging into their savings from 59% in June to 80% in September. And the pink line shows you that more farmers are selling an asset, pawning an asset to be able to cope with the pandemic. And the increase is pretty significant from 11% in June to 38%. It's kind of natural with that kind of data to see that farmers have been asking for cash every month, and that has remained their top request. A recent randomized control trial by IPA and Give Directly actually shows that cash transfers have helped low-income Kenyan households weather the COVID-19 shock. But I looked into that, and it looks like almost all of the current momentum around cash transfers in Kenya, which is championed by the Kenyan government, UNICEF, World Food Programme, Oxfam, Give Directly, among other organizations, is focused on urban areas. Similar schemes, conditional or unconditional, towards farmers could prove impactful at this time in a way few other things can. This is because non-farm income is limited right now. Savings are running low because people are drawing down on them. Crops are still on the field and harvest is still a few months out. The second set of insights is related to the picture I don't want to paint. I don't want to paint a gloomy picture. Neither do I believe that aid is the only solution to this problem. I think with the current curfew being lifted, or when the curfew was lifted, things were beginning to return to normal on the farm. So this is the chart on the left. And most notably, you see the pink line on the left showing the proportion of farmers who needed to hire less labor to cope with the pandemic. That has decreased from 94% having to make this adjustment in June to just 45% having to make this adjustment. And we've seen similar sort of returns to normalcy in produce harvested and even in inputs purchased, although that's one that I'll discuss a little bit more. And then on the right, you see confidence. 65% of farmers are actually confident that they'll be able to undertake activities as normal on their farm in the next month. That's huge. We did, however, see that the farmer confidence is decreasing as rains approached. And it was 87% in July, 76% in August, and now 65% in September. And the pink line on the right shows you the steep decline in the proportion of those who are feeling very confident about the upcoming month. The key to this confidence lies in access to markets and affordable inputs, both of which private sector players and impact investors can directly influence. So let's take those one at a time now. Farmers have consistently spoken of input prices being higher than usual in each round of data collection that we've done. 3/4 of those who reduced the amount of input they purchased stated higher prices as the primary reason for this reduction. You'll see this on the bar chart in the middle, that the next set of reasons is actually mentioned by only 1/5 of the farmers. While one might be tempted to say farmers always complain about price and high costs, we found evidence that farmers are likely at the receiving end of a wider supply chain trend. According to Kenyan agro-dealer surveys conducted by Precision Agriculture for Design in August and September, over half of the agro-dealers paid a higher price for the same set of inputs that they purchased. Those who made this claim were statistically more likely to report charging farmers a higher price. Farmers are still preparing their land and planting, and there's a short window to support organizations that are making affordable inputs available to farmers this season. And we urge whoever can help to actually help in this area while that short window for the short rain season lasts. And then 2 more slides and then I'll stop talking. Majority of farmers continue to reduce how much they sell to cope with the pandemic, while a third of them are actively choosing to sell less, mostly so their family can consume more. The other 2/3, they say that they wish they could sell more, but they have no choice. And when you look at the chart on the right, you also see that farmers who sold produce in the last 2 weeks, 30% said that the price received was much lower than they usually would in September, compared to 18% in June. It appears that farmers might be at the receiving end of an adverse supply chain trend here as well. And equipping agribusinesses to adapt their models to safely procure produce, provide transportation, and make market information available to farmers would help them make the most of their upcoming harvest, as would innovative access to storage. And just a set of insights that are early, because we've only collected this information for 1 round, but I found them surprising, so I thought I'd share them with you. This is around digital usage of farmers during this time. We added a module to understand changes in the use of digital approaches during the pandemic, because we see the huge potential that these approaches offer. And while we've only collected data for a month, as I mentioned, a few things that I found interesting were only 41% of farmers actually reported no change in digital usage, and 23% reported a decrease in their use, which I would have expected it to be more. Perhaps that's why I was surprised. And so we looked into the barriers for usage, and that's where some of this becomes interesting. So the top barriers for use were not having access to a device or not having cash to buy bundles to use these technologies. We also heard some reports of farmers not trusting these methods, but they sort of came further down in the order of in the sequence in which farmers mentioned them, or frequency of mentions. Only 36% spoke of an increase, and almost all of this group used their phones for financial transactions, which is good news. And other than phone calls, which seems to be the most frequent increase and decrease that farmers spoke about, the increases were concentrated in unpaid or less expensive tools like text, messages, and radio, while the decreases were concentrated in WhatsApp and Facebook, and sort of the bundled internet usage, which kind of also points to the whole financial strife, the request for cash, which links to the request for inputs. And it all kind of comes together as a narrative on cash is king. Access to inputs during this time will be really valuable. Access to innovative ways of reaching market, or if that's not possible, then storage. And how we can collectively think about lowering barriers to digital technologies being more available to farmers during this time are just some calls to action that we came up with through our data. Lisa, back over to you.
Many of us have heard, the World Bank and other experts say that that food systems have probably been the quote unquote the most resilient sector in terms of COVID response. But I think that the picture that we're seeing painted here with the Kenyan smallholder farmers, and we know that smallholder farmers across Africa provide 70 to 80% of all the food that's consumed in Africa, that essentially they have tapped out. They've tapped out their savings, in order to kind of get where they are now, and that they're feeling the pinch between, increasing costs and decreasing sales prices and decreasing access to markets. So I think it's a really important time for us to engage with some of our actors close to the ground. And let me first direct some questions to Simon, who is the Managing Director of Agro Wallet. So I know Agro Wallet is sitting right there in between buyers and farmers, moving financial services to both parties, and I know that that this has been a really difficult time for liquidity, at all aspects of agricultural value chains and food chains. So, Simon, we'd love to hear more about your reflections as you look at this research and your experience as you have managed Agro Wallet through the first phase of this crisis.
Yep. Thanks, Lisa. So, my name's Simon Daho. I'm a managing director and co-founder of Agri Wallet. It's a tool to connect farmers to digitally mobile first, connect farmers to, it's a payment platform in which farmers and markets and input suppliers are connected. I find it very interesting, the research that 60 Decibels did, especially of course on the aspect of farmers tend to borrow less, which for me immediately leads to the follow-on question, why? Do they not want to? Can they not? So that's something I'll look into the research to find if there's some answers to that from this particular research. Also very interesting to see cash is king. I think we see the same. There's always a shortage of cash at the farmer level, and there are competing needs, and competing needs are always pressing and urgent needs. So once our farmers hold the dear money they've gotten from any kind of produce, then it's very hard for them to make sure that it goes to inputs and not to these competing needs, which are just as urgent. Think about health and education. And what we've seen over the last half year, 3/4 of a year is, but that's very much, it's not research like 60 Decibels has done, but we hear a lot of our clients, farmers, markets, input suppliers complaining about the situation, that there's less available in terms of good inputs. And if the inputs are there, that they're at least slightly more expensive, which seems to be supported by this research. So that's, I think, and that we sort of my first reaction to this. Thank you.
Yeah, great. And I guess one of the questions that many people will have is, as Agri Wallet is engaged with buyers and farmers, how do you see repayments? A lot of organizations that we've been working with, whether they're commercial banks or microfinance institutions close to farmers, have really halted lending altogether, or curtailed it, citing different kinds of risks. So, what have you been seeing in terms of movement and repayment at the farmer level? Because I think that's a strong bellwether, for how farmers are doing.
It definitely is, Lisa. So I'm not going to give figures on this one, but we've seen a strong increase in non-performing loans. So it means that people are not paying us back, and it means that they may not have the money, or they have competing needs that they rank higher than paying us back, which I can fully understand. But all in all, it's, as you say, a very strong indicator of value chains that are not performing well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it gets us into this question of the chicken and the egg. If the financial sector sees too many risks to deploy the liquidity, then farmers are going to continue to be cash strapped. So, it really kind of goes back to Venu's point about, different kinds of cash transfers into this environment. And definitely what we've seen in Kenya is as Venu said, that there's a concentration of cash transfers going into, into urban areas and less into rural areas. We're not seeing really from our side any real movement of cash transfers into rural areas to help farmers through these periods. So, okay, great. We'll open up to group discussion in just a minute. Thanks, Simon. And ask Patricia to introduce herself. So Patricia is working with Mediae, which is an amazing group of service delivery channels for information for farmers. And I know that Patricia's been part of really listening to farmers and also driving information to farmers. So Patricia, what has Mediae been seeing, and how have you been, interacting with the market, especially given the insights from the 60 Decibels research?
Thank you, Lisa. So I'm Patricia with the Mediae Group, and basically what we do is we look at how media can be used to support education and development. So in agriculture, we produce an agricultural show called Shamba Shape Up, which is a makeover on smallholder farms. And backing all this up, we have iShamba, which is a mobile call center that's able to assist our farmers. Looking at the research that has been done, it's quite clear that yes, cash is king. And during this period of COVID, what we have seen through iShamba and Shamba Shape Up, the TV program, is that we found that our farmers typically within maybe 8 months, we get about 10 to 15,000 SMSs, people sending, asking questions. But between March up to date, we've received about 48,000 questions just from farmers. And a lot of these questions are ranging is, I can't be able to pay my loan. Where am I going to buy my inputs for the next season? And what do I do with the food that I already have and I can't sell to markets? Which is echoing what Venu has done in her research and showing us these are some of the things that farmers are asking. So we've been receiving a lot of these questions from our farmers, and we're trying to tackle to show them, what do you need to do? So for example, if you're going to go into the next season, you need to look at maybe a shorter term crop, grow a high value crop. So there are all sorts of things that are happening in the background during this time, Lisa.
Thanks very much. And just diving back into, into how Shamba Shape Up has been addressing questions. What are you seeing in terms of interest in different kinds of providers of reaching out to farmers at this time? I know that Shamba Shape Up is kind of a bridge between providers trying to reach farmers and farmers trying to figure out how to make the markets work. So how has Shamba Shape Up really kind of responded to this period of uncertainty and unstable markets? What do you think that your role has really been in helping farmers kind of bridge this gap?
So our role has been essentially giving farmers more information, so working alongside with our partners and ensuring that farmers can get this messaging. For example, during March when all this was starting, there was a lot of, farmers were more concerned about their health and safety. So we got a lot of people asking, can my cows give me COVID? How are my workers going to be coping? So we had a lot of that. And then that kind of changed towards, as things progressed, and it was now more on how can I access inputs. So Shamba Shape Up and iShamba have been linking with different providers, trying to link farmers to these people so they can get all this. But then comes the thing about where inputs are expensive, so farmers are also struggling because as much as I can get the input, but it's more expensive. So that has been a big thing. So we've also been trying to tackle things like on conservation agriculture going forward, because again, there was COVID and there was locusts. So a lot of things were happening at the same time. So we've tried to really engage with the players all around, get the right information to all these farmers. The other thing we've done through the program was also now create content that was specific for these farmers. So for example, we looked at post-harvest management and losses. We've always tackled this on the grain side, but this time we were talking about horticulture, fruits and vegetables, which were coming to season. So for us, it was to work with universities to see what technologies are there to assist our farmers, and then showcase this in the program that reaches 9 million people in Kenya, and then get that interaction through iShamba.
Great, and I think that leads us into a good space for our group discussion. So with Patricia, Venu, and Simon, and we have a range of questions that we'll go ahead and just discuss as a group, and then we'll be able to open it up to questions from the audience. So the first one is really for Mediae and for Agro Wallet. During this time, how has digital technology, both of you guys are using digital platforms, you're using digital data, and you're working across multiple partners. How has digital technology helped you to pivot during this time of COVID and Desert Locust? How have you been able to leverage technology, to keep your organizations moving and to be relevant in this time? I'll open it up for whoever would like to take that question first.
I can go. So for Mediae and iShamba, during this time, digital access has been so vital for us speaking with farmers. We've been able to call our farmers, do surveys, learn from them, what are their concerns. And, as I said, we've moved from receiving, 10 to 15,000 interactions to 48,000 interactions within just this period. So for us, the digital space has grown. And when we also look at our engagement with the Locust and the WhatsApp, yes, it worked perfectly well because you're able to send, more information. But there was a challenge because some of these things were happening in areas where you look at, the digital technologies that are available, the uptake is a bit low. So we found that just even having your basic phone using SMS, to send out to farmers messaging has really, really been effective during this time. And I think farmers have also seen the value of having somebody they can call and ask a question and get the right answer from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Venu's data about 26% of farmers, I think it was 26%, decreasing use of digital tools, but really you still see in a time of economic downturn 36% increasing their use of these tools, and then many farmers, majority of farmers, staying even and still investing in these tools. And certainly we've seen, as Patricia was just noting, as we've looked at the impact, what changes behavior, what do farmers really, what are they really migrating toward in order to make the decisions they have to make? It seems like it's a combination, that SMS is really important, but that call centers are also still important, that understanding and learning through radio and television is important. I mean, they're trying to put together a very complex picture, and that farmers are reaching out across multiple channels to figure that out. And let me go ahead and launch the same question over to Simon. Simon, for you and Agro Wallet, and I know you guys have great tech that helps to guide your solution. How has digital technology enabled Agro Wallet to keep moving forward in a very difficult time?
I think that in March, we quite quickly picked up on the changes that were happening in our environment, much more quicker so than maybe in the past without an environment like Agri Wallet. But which I mean is that we quite quickly learned from clients and also through some data and payouts that we saw that we assumed, and talking to our partners, we assumed there would be a shortage of credits to come, and there would be a need of more credit even. And I think the technology we have, all of our platforms have the ability to quickly react. So in theory, I think the need for credit lines and the need for interventions and help from let's say institutional side, maybe government side, was identified much more quickly than in the past. But I have to add to that I think, and then we launched a couple of initiatives to let's say broaden the finance capability towards those farmers that are in need of those. And I find the reaction on the institutional sides of the big banks still pretty much the same as before the crisis, which is basically having a very low appetite to join any COVID response or any response that is needed at this point. So I think on that end of the spectrum, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I think what we are providing is the last mile solution towards those farmers in a bi-directional way, both through SMS and data, but SMS with farmers to us is also a major tool.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense for what we've seen, that organizations that are able to leverage that two-way communication channel with farmers that prove that they're relevant, that are listening, that are engaging, that prove that they're still there as a partner, are gaining ground. What we're seeing is a lot more farmers moving to digital channels as answers, as mobility and instability are impacting their ability to do their job. Great. Okay, let me move on to a next question for the group. So we've lived through the first wave of COVID. We've kind of figured out, as Patricia said, kind of the health questions. We've gathered a lot of data. We've begun to react. What do we see moving forward? What is the impact of where we are? Looking at Venu's data, at the 60 decibels data about where farmers are at this time and the challenges that they face. What do we see as the impact of this moving forward, and how are your organizations going to respond? And maybe I'll go ahead and send that first over to Venu.
Yeah, and I'm happy to reflect on when we started collecting this information. What were the main things we heard? Because that was around the peak of the lockdown. The first round, the lockdown in Kenya started towards the end of March. Our first round of data collection was done in June, which is pretty close to the lockdown, at which point the lockdown was still in execution and hadn't fully been lifted, or was only partially getting lifted. So based on that experience and what we heard in those early months, and comparing that to what we might hear in the coming months as the lockdown becomes more stringent, is I think three things are likely to happen quite immediately. First is non-farm sources of income. So incomes like casual labor, incomes like regular wages, incomes related to businesses, those were the ones that went off the quickest. And so farmers were relying much more on agriculture, and we've actually not seen those incomes come back. And really every month, the number of sources of income that the sample has lost has only increased. So people have fewer sources of income now compared to what they did in June. So I'd keep an eye out for that. And I think that has implications on what organizations can do to support farmers on the farming side of things, but also on the non-farming side of things. So sort of other complementary support that can keep a diversity income in some way. The second thing that we noticed happen immediately was anything related to mobility, right? I mean, that's kind of natural, but the hardest hit came to hired labor. And so people were not, and as I shared in one of my charts, 94% of our sample in that first month said they hired less labor than they needed in the last 2 weeks to cope with the pandemic. And then again, we heard 70-80% of people say that in July. And then we started asking, what is going on? Why is this happening? And actually, quite interestingly, people said the price of labor is too high. And that became the main reason. Of course, mobility and